So I had some initial techniques I was using, on the orange slices back over here, and they worked out okay, but I wasn't completely thrilled with them. Sometimes it looked a little bit overworked, and so I was trying to find some alternatives on trying to make those, and so I came up with a solution that I was actually doing here. And let me just show you on those. I'll work on a different area on those. It's still we still start out with the first layer here, right? Putting in our wet into wet stuff that breaks down and puts a base coat on of some things that we're working on, and so that's kind of a cool deal. The next part is, let's do this. I need some, slide this over a little bit so you can see what I'm working with. I need some yellow, so I'm going to put some water in the yellow, water in the orange, water in the red. I'll probably use brown in there somewhere eventually. But those are my warm colors that I'm going to be working with. Yes. Let's go ahead and do this one right here. Okay. So, I'm going to use my medium-sized brush here on this thing. That's going to be best for me. Let's make sure my gunk's cleaned out of it. And I'm going to start out with, you can start out with whatever color you like. I'm going to put just a little bit of orange into the top of the tray up here. And so a light coat, that's the key. That's what I was thinking of, a light coat. And so if I'm going to be doing that section, I'm just going to want to put here some light coats down. And what I'm looking to do is still leave some values. This is much like the other that I did. You may have remembered on those, where you're just putting some things, and you're leaving some lighter values in between. And it makes it so that there's these little orange pustules or orange sacs of juice that we're working for in here, and just make them kind of irregular. But you notice that against that background, they kind of, it's not that heavy, and I think that's what I like that a little bit better. So we have the yellow, which is a component of orange in our background, and now I'm coming in with just some orangey and working through that. Okay, a little bit more orange. Okay, cool. But it's very, very light in its initial application. Some of the others we were working with was just a little harder. But we're trying to make sure we have that area in between, so it looks like there's little areas in between. And so that's still working out pretty good for us. But a light coat in through here. And so that's cool. And so I've done that. Now what I want to do, I'm just going to touch the tip of the yellow, and in a few of those spots, I'm just going to put a little dab of yellow and let it diffuse into that area a little bit. That's because yellow is really light on those, so a little wet into wet, on what we're doing. And so now I just dab some yellow in there. And yellow's not going to make it too harsh of a treatment. And so it's starting to get a little bit more mottled, a little bit more moving and flowing in there on what I'm looking for. And I'm going to let it sit for a little bit. While that's sitting, let me point out a few things. If you'll notice down here at the edge, where I have like we see the bottom of the oranges, this was done. I did that over here, much the same way. I think I showed a little bit on that one. But we just used it as kind of an initial coat. Let me go ahead and double check, make sure that we have a little bit of knowledge of what we're doing on that one. Big brush on this one. And I first feel, I'm going to fill this area back in here. And this area needs to be darker because it's the side view, so it's in shadow a little bit more. And so I'm starting out with a coat of orange. And if you can work quickly, you can have pigment in there already. Okay, so this can be darker, this can be heavy. And so more pigment in general in there, because that has to contrast against the white or lighter part of the thing there. So here's what I do. Now that I have that in there, and it's a pretty good coat, right? We have pretty good pigment. Now I'm going to take this, I'm going to dry out my brush. And let me get some yellow. And I'm just going to dab in, puts in dots of yellow. Remember our assignment where we had the different bits of wetness on that? And so this one is the wetness of the paper. You'll probably notice it's not spreading that far. It's staying pretty localized. Now these dots are going to help facilitate the texture of the oranges. Okay, here this is red, dots of red. Just putting them in there a little bit so that they'll spread. I want it going from lighter to darker, and it's okay if it moves around. That's a great thing on those. And here's another one. Right on the darkest side, maybe some dots of brown, and let it move, let it change. And even if it gets a little bit drier, we can come back in. And this is a dry brush. If you're thinking, oh wow, that's too much, that's too much. Actually, let me do this. Now I'm going to come back with some more orange. And as you put little dots in there as it dries, it will start to create a texture of the orange with a little irregular dot-sized pieces, right? This is still a little wet in here, but if I keep repeating this, it's going to have more of a mottled texture, kind of like what we see down here. And so that's what our goal is for those sorts of things. Pencil sharpener there, and then there's also one up front in the boxes up front. Okay, so that's a little bit about the background. I'm going to let this dry out a little bit more. I'm pulling out some of the values, let it dry. And so I'm going to let it dry and have that work for me. Okay, now I'm going to take my brush right here. This is dried off on that, and I'm just kind of making some streaks over here like that, because I have some thick areas and some thin areas. Okay, so now I want to come back in here, and I'm going to go get some more orange. And the thing of it is, as you layer pieces on top of it, it'll gradually show those different values. And so now I'm coming back in. This is mostly all dried, and I want to put some little dabs in here of orange. And you know, the overlapping of those places is what's going to make it look kind of mottled on that. So there's going to be some yellow slashes. There's going to be some orange slashes. There's going to be more orange slashes layered on top. And so that idea of just overlapping little pieces is going to make it look a little less muddy. The thing that I didn't care for on these ones as much is when I put that last coat on it to try and blend them a little bit, it got a little bit muddy with those. And watercolors is supposed to be fresh. It's supposed to be alive, sort of a thing. And so when it was a little bit muddy, I said, maybe I'm doing something wrong. Maybe I need another approach. I need to have this a little bit more fresh. I mean, I think it worked, but this one is giving me some options and still keeping it fairly light. I'm going to go back just over this edge here, just because that needs to be fairly dark, the edge, because it's right next to the white, right? And so I can put it there. Even with that, as we look at it, notice we still have the light areas coming through. Now we have some oranger areas, some yellow areas on those as well. And it's going dark enough, but I still think it's a little bit more fresh, a little bit more light. Not bad compared with these guys back here. I think they're both fine on that one. But I thought that this technique here made it look a little bit more fresh, as a lack of for a better term. Okay, one last technique I wanted to show you. I know some of you are thinking, Mr. White, I forgot to leave some light areas in there. And so how am I going to get some of like the highlights? As we look at some of the areas in here, there are some actual highlights on there. Well, we're going to utilize this tool right here. You can scratch in some highlights of your area on your areas. Okay, so here's my example. And some of these already have them on there. I'm going to try not to get my hand right in the middle of everything. And so, like, let's say back here, you've noticed you can just come in like this, and you can scratch out a little bit more, scratch off the surface, and put in some highlights on these little pustules, these little orange sacs. Okay, these ones kind of have it here, so this one does not. And so I'm just going to come here, and with the tip of the Xacto knife, scratch off some of the highlight areas. This will also help it look a little less muddy, because now I have hard line white right in there as part of the painting, and you can just scratch it out. Now this is really good technique for putting in small highlights, not as much bigger highlight areas, although you can use like a sandpaper or something like that to maybe get that going as far as things go. And so this is adding a little bit more light to that muddied area. If you have some areas that look a little bit too, I don't know, overly painted, and you need a little bit of highlight in there, this is a great technique for coming in and lightening up the area. All right, and so maybe a little over here too is just scratching out some of that area. And it's really cool because it is kind of sharp and irregular, a lot of times like reflected lights are with those. And so that's an example of now this area has a little bit of reflected light in it and what we're trying to do. So that's going to be our overall goal in trying to create some of these areas. Oh, look at that, it's starting to dry a little bit there. Now maybe let's see, I'll try this. This is orange. Maybe I let it dry a little bit too much. Maybe. Notice it when you dab it in, it's not spreading very far at all, which is what I wanted. I wanted that stippled orange peel texture. And so now we're coming in here and adding some of those darker values to create that light, dark, stippled, textured orange peel look on those. I want a little bit of brown, but I don't want a lot of bit of brown. So this might need to be just slightly wetter. But just along these edges over here, because I want it to be darker as it goes down to the bottom. So there's a little bit of brown. And then let's come back with some more orange. And I'm to kind of dab the brown somewhat with the orange to mute it down a little bit so it's not quite as strong. And then we're coming up here and we're looking pretty smooth. We're liking that. Okay, so I've muted down that brown a little bit. Now let's do this. Clean off my brush. And let's come in with, on the top, some dabs of yellow. Because that yellow's a lighter color, huh? And so that will make it transition and still have it look textured on those. Okay, so now we have more of a textured background down here. We look, there's the textured orange. Here's a darker one right next to it, that textured orange peel. Same thing up over here. So that's going to make these orange slice parts come more forward towards you as you work through those things. And so that's the technique that I finally settled on that's working pretty good for me on those. And I'll continue to work through those ideas and concepts of trying to there. Probably put in some highlights, maybe scratch in some highlights over here, finish this front orange slice, finish up this orange slice, and then we'll have it kind of completed and done. Oh, I got to get the middle over here still, right? With some of those values changes. From white to light and gradually getting darker as it goes in, much the same as this piece over here. And then that will be the finished piece. Got to fill the page. Got to be from stem to stern. We don't want any blatantly obvious little untreated areas to come there. These are treated where the white is on that we accounted for. That's cool. We like that. But other than that, we don't want that to happen. And so that will be, just keep on working on it. When it's done, photograph it, upload it, and you'll be ready to go for your sliced oranges.